Welcome to my weekly podcast, Inspiring Each Other. I'm Dr. Phil Worth, and tonight I'm here with Michelle Lebrun, mother, wife, sister, author, wine connoisseur. Her book, Holy Shift, Driving Through Grief in a Vintage VW, came out last year, and she's here tonight to share a little bit with us. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.
Tell me about your book.
Well, my book, Holy Shift, Driving Through Grief in a Vintage VW, I published it last year, but it basically took most of my life to sit down and write it. It's a story about my sister who passed away at 13. My family and I were on a cross-country trip of a lifetime. We went cross-country camping, packed up a camper and a big station wagon, and my dad took off from work, and we all went cross-country, and it was her 13th birthday. We went to California, I went to Disneyland, and camped in all the national parks. And on the way back in Colorado, we were staying in a hotel, and Sunday morning we were getting ready to go to church, and my sister was taking a shower, and the water turned very hot, and she got scalded. So I can tell you all the details about the book, but I'd like you to buy the book and read the book and find hope in the book. But it was a path of healing for my family. It was very traumatic. I was 4. My sister was 13. My brothers were 9 and 11. And I really don't know my life without grief. My sister was a bright light to our family. She was kind, she was loving, she was generous, she was sweet. And when the light goes out of the family, it's tragic. Her death was tragic, but it was tragic for our family. But we found ways to work through the pain. And in my book, I talk about the power of prayer. My uncle, after my sister passed away in 1969, he wrote a book dedicated to my sister, and it was called Mary Ellen's New Rosary for Young People. So he was a missionary. He was a Catholic priest, and he was a missionary, and he thought that the youth back then were disenfranchised with religion. So he thought if he took the Hail Mary and repurposed it a little bit, changed a few words, and asked the prayer to manifest a virtue. What do you need more of in your life? Do you need to be more loving? Do you need to be more understanding? Do you need to be more patient? Words like that. You pick it, you manifest it, you add it into this prayer. And what was probably an impossible mission turned into a possible mission because he invited everyone to the prayer table. So I, along the way, 40 years later, after my sister passed, I was inspired to take that book and maybe create a new foreword and republish it, because after 40 years it was out of print, and I felt it was too important of a message to not continue to be passed on. I wanted a legacy to my sister, an homage to my uncle who had passed away. So what started as a foreword and a few changes turned into a whole new book. So this is the new book. Very proud to say. And I think it's my little service mission. My uncle's book was a little service mission, and now my book is the second rendition of a service mission.
How did you start? Right, so as you're writing this book, thinking about grief from a long time ago, is it a process where you were always a writer and you were writing a few things over the years that you had saved up, or did you just go, I'm going to start this, and it transitioned into something else?
When I was little, I wrote in diaries like all little girls do. Then I wrote in journals, and then I realized at a young age I was probably going to write a book someday. That was one of my goals. And always journaled. My first job out of college, I worked at the White House, and I worked for President Reagan, and I was part of his speech writing office. And when we worked hard, we worked hard. But when he went to the ranch or he went to Camp David, we had some downtime. So what I did in that downtime is I typed on the typewriter or the computer and I started writing the book then. So I had years of raw material to pull from. So I started to compile it into a story then. And then, you left the White House, you go to other jobs, you you move back home, you get married, you have children, things get put on the back burner. But I always had it in mind. I wanted to do something about it. So it was COVID 2020 when I got this nudge to do it. My cousin had reached out to me and she said, the book's out of print. We'd like to print more copies. And I said, let's do it a little bit better than that. Let me write a new foreword and maybe, add a few more things. So I got a publisher, and what was a foreword turned into a brand new book. So it's an opus for me. It's like, I had to write this book first before the other ones could come out of the chute.
In your book, you talk about it as being a 40-year grieving process, right? Little by little over 40 years. You talk about how we all grieve differently, some quick, some slow, and you use a wonderful metaphor about shifting through the gears as you discuss this. What was your grieving process like?
Well, as a 4-year-old, 1 minute your sister's there and the next minute she's not. And kids don't want to stay in a tragic mode. They want to move through it quickly. You don't want your parents to be sad. So we tried to move on, maybe as nothing happened, although something huge had happened. And our parents tried to talk to us, my brothers and I, and we didn't really want to talk about it. So, we didn't. We spent years and years where we didn't talk about it. But we all grieved. We prayed together. I know my parents are such faithful people. We prayed the rosary every Sunday night, and we prayed it my uncle's way, which was an homage to my sister. So, we gathered together every Sunday night and prayed. But still, you just you're numb. And we didn't go to counselors. We didn't have support groups. And my brothers and I didn't really talk about it. It wasn't until later in life that we did. So you're moving along through life, and as I have in the book, I have an epilogue with different parts of my life where I'm grieving, whether when I'm 4, when I'm a teenager, when I'm in high school, when I'm in college, in my first job, when I'm getting married, when I'm a mom. And then you realize what it's like to lose a child. I don't know what it's like, but you begin to wonder what it could be like when you are a parent. So all of those different moments that I put in the epilogue, I realized they're moments when my sister was reaching out to me and saying, hey, I love you. And as a human, that's grief. So they tell us they love us when they remind us to grieve, and grief is love.
We have gone through loss. My parents, my in-laws' parents, and my children were young, going through some of that stuff. It was kind of the same process in that anytime we would bring it up, they pretty quickly would move on to the next thing, right? Let's go here, let's do this. And so I think it's pretty natural. I guess maybe that's why we say children are so resilient, is they just kind of bounce through this. Tell me about faith to you as you're going through this. You describe in your book different versions of faith. You talk about the rosary and the Hail Marys, and tell me about that piece.
Well, my uncle's book was predominantly about the rosary. And, it's an important foundation of Catholicism. And really the difference between the traditional and the way my uncle created it was the Hail Mary. So my book, I had to put the rosary in it because it was important to us, get my family getting through the loss of my sister. But the Hail Mary, full of life version is really what my book is about, because I invite everybody to the table. All faiths, all religions, whatever. You have faith, you don't have faith. I'd prefer you didn't have faith, because I want you to know you can have faith in something, and you need faith in your hardest times, times of struggle. So, the Hail Mary it's saved my life and made my life more times than I can count.
You describe using it in meditation and prayer and in so many different aspects in your life. A wonderful part of your sort of family tradition growing up after Mary Ellen passed.
Mm-hmm.
It touched me. It was a really nice. I've always appreciated the faith that your family has.
Well,
all of you.
My parents are, my dad has, miss him terribly. He passed in 18, but they were so full of faith. And I think if it wasn't for that, none of us would have survived. No, none of us. I believe that with my whole heart.
What were some of the challenges as you're going through this book, trying to put it together, trying to edit it, trying to, what was that process about?
It was, writing is great therapy for me. The challenge was I didn't want to screw it up. It was too important to me, to my sister, to my family, to, just be cavalier about it. I took it so seriously, and it was so important that it came out of the gate just right. So a little background: my original publisher was had a more of a religious feel. They were a religious publisher, Catholic publisher, and I was hooked up with them by a cousin down in Virginia. And as I was putting the manuscript together, and I was writing it and working with a really, really nice man at the publishing house, I felt like I was always writing it to a specific audience, like a very targeted audience. Like, it wasn't as universal as I wanted. But I'm like, okay, I've got a publisher. This is great, And then, probably a year into it, I realized it was just not really what I wanted. And we agreed, fork in the road. Thanks, but no thanks. I think maybe I need to find another publisher. It was hard. It was a little devastating. I was really sad to have to part ways, but I really think it had a different mission. So about 2 weeks went by. I set the book aside. I'm like, okay, now what do I do? But I just knew there was something else. I knew something else was coming. So 2 weeks later, my sister's grade school friend calls me. She's a friend of the family. She's been published. She's been on Oprah. She's quite accomplished career counselor, Robin Cristiano. Mm-hmm. She calls me. She says, "Hey, Michelle, I hear you're writing a book." I'm like, "Yeah, I am, but I just parted ways with my publisher." She's like, "Huh. Well, that's too bad." She goes, "But you know what? I have a friend who's a publisher. Let me see if he'll take you on." She's like, "Can't guarantee anything, but we'll pass names and you can talk to him." So week went by. He called. I sent him the manuscript as it was. I wasn't really ready to send him the manuscript because I didn't think it was really where I wanted it to be. And he said, "Just send the manuscript." And then the next day he sent me a contract. So it worked out. I got lucky.
Wonderful.
I got lucky. One door shuts, another opens.
Absolutely. To me, that's sort of this river of faith. Whatever religion you want to call it, there's always this river of faith that is, in the background of what we're doing. It's a Catholic book by a Catholic publisher.
Well, was.
Right. That's where I'm going with this. With a lady that's kind of a little bit hippie, right? In a VW Bug, right? You don't have the white thing buttoned up to here. And that had to be a bit of a transition, right? To putting something out there that's really you, and at the same time respects your uncle and your sister
Mm-hmm.
and the religious part of all that experience and of your family. How do you make that transition?
Well, my uncle was a free spirit, so I learned from him.
Hmm.
And he wanted this prayer to go far and wide. So I felt like when he passed me the baton. So, I do talk about my faith. Yep, I'm not, I'm like a free range Catholic. I don't know if that's the right word, convenience store Catholic. A lot of people would have an issue with that. But, I really, I pray. I have faith in the Hail Mary. That is where my faith is, and no one's going to tell me differently.
I love one of the lines in your book, as you just brought it up, is this convenience store Catholic, right? That God, faith is there for all of us, and you don't need to be as rigid as some of religious organizations make it. You talk about, like, grabbing a Twinkie and grabbing a cup of coffee and grabbing some Jiffy Lube for the engine, whatever you're doing.
Right.
Taking from religion kind of what you need and giving back what you can give back.
Right.
It was a wonderful sort of metaphor through your book. What do you love about it? What's your favorite part?
Well, I don't know about favorite part, but a challenging part was, opening up your heart and putting your vulnerability out there for the world. I mean, I don't know if the world is seeing this yet, but hopefully it goes far and wide. See, there's always a little worry about who's going to take a pop at you or challenge you on this or disagree with you on this. And I'm like, this book is all my heart. And so, there's nothing in there that anybody can take me to task on except my beliefs. So, and that's okay,
It's wonderful. As this past week, I was published for the first time in a paper down in North Carolina.
Congrats.
Thank you. But it's terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
right? As you lay your soul and your emotions and your heartfelt, it's a small step away from your journal, I think, when you do this right? Whew.
It's uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable and so vulnerable, and you're so anxious about, is somebody going to like this or not like this? How did you cope with those emotions? I did one little article. You got a book, right? How do you cope with those emotions? And you have a lot of time invested in this.
I have a lot. Yeah, it's been 55 years for me to get this down, get it right. I don't worry about it.
I love it.
I don't worry about it. You know what? I think once it's down and out and people read it, it's a book to help people. And if it's not for you, don't read it. Or if you get it, pass it on,
What talk about your mom a little bit through the process.
Oh, my mom, she is my superpower. She is. Without her, this book would not be possible. She rode shotgun with me the entire time. She read every manuscript, every draft, and I know that was very hard for her. It was like ripping a Band-Aid off a wound. But she did it. And, she maybe would have liked it to be a certain way. And I was so adamant of why it needed to be this way. And in the end, she couldn't be happier. And she's so proud of it, it's about her family.
Yeah.
So.
Talk about your relationship with your dad. You describe driving in the VW with the smell of gasoline and leather, knowing your dad was a car guy. I can feel that in him, knowing your dad a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel those lines in him the way you wrote them. What was that relationship like?
Well, my dad was the best. I was so lucky to be, his baby girl, and he was the glue to our family. My mom was the rock solid cement, and my dad was, she was the cement for the faith, and dad was just the glue and got us back to the road to living. But a caveat to my dad, in the process of writing this book, I was searching for a title and had gone through Metamorphosis. I had many titles for this book and nothing really resonated. And, you want it to come out of the gate. You want people to recognize and see and go, what? What does that say? So I talked to my publisher. I'm like, I'm having a hard time with the title of this book. And he's like, Michelle, he's like, I don't know why I have to tell you this. He goes, have you prayed about it? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So I went to bed and I talked to my dad. And the next morning I woke up and the manuscript completely changed. I sat at the computer and it was like everything poured out of me. And that's where the car theme came in. I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of that, because I grew up in the car business. That's what my dad did. He was a car dealer. So I just felt like my dad was just flowing through me, and that is what changed the theme.
It's an unexpected twist in the story.
No kidding.
Right? And it really fits.
It
right? It so fits.
It's so serendipitous but purposeful. And I remember sending it to my publisher, and I said, be careful what you wish for, because the manuscript is now completely changed. Same story, different theme. And I was typing, I said, but I still can't get that title. And I'm like, oh my God. Shift. My sister had to shift in her final days of life. The Hail Mary took a shift with a few word changes. Our family had to shift through my sister's loss. And when you grieve, you have to shift. Otherwise, you stay neutral and you go nowhere. So, boom, holy shift. That's when it started. That's the title. I know when I told my mother, she's like, what? Holy what? I'm like, shift. Not, she's like,
a little more structured.
She's like,
she's a little more structured.
I don't know. And then, I had, Darcy Heron's brother, Brad Backman, designed the cover. And he's like, oh my God, this is a perfect title. It's a perfect title. And so he created, he took pictures, and, Darcy took pictures of me and the bug, and Brad worked his magic. And yeah, the cover is it's the cover of my dreams.
It's a great book. Tell me about your kids in the process, right? Now, as you go from losing a sister to watching your parents struggle with that process, and now all of a sudden you have to tell this story to your two kids. What's the emotion that gets all tied up in that?
Worry. It's like they knew that from an early age about their Aunt Lala. Like she was a part of my life, she's a part of their life from an early age. And I couldn't wait till after their 13th birthday. Yeah, that 13th birthday was always a marker.
Fear, anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't get any better, though.
Yeah.
Because, so that's where the Hail Mary comes into play for me a lot. Hail Mary full of life, protecting, whatever virtue comes into mind. But I pray the protecting one a lot. In the middle of the night, when you start thinking, when it's dark, bad thoughts come into your head and worry. I overwork that one a lot.
Do you still do it most days?
Every day.
If you were going to talk to someone else that's going through some kind of grieving process now, no matter what that process is, what would the advice be?
I don't have any advice. I can't give advice on it. I can only tell them what worked for us, what worked for me. I would never want to tell somebody how to grieve. I think it's important for people to realize there's tools out there for them. There's friends, family. There's counselors. There's focus groups. There's faith. And go your own pace, go your own speed, stay in your lane. Because grief is lifelong. There's no marathon. You just have to find your own way through it.
As I've gone through some of my stuff recently and having run marathons, the thing that was great about a marathon is that there was a finish line. Grief doesn't really have a finish line. It kind of lives with you in a different way as you go from 4 to 16 to being a mom to hopefully someday being a grandmother, right? It just evolves.
It does evolve.
Does it still beat you up some days?
Yeah, it can come out of the blue.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, from age 4, when like your life is just it's not defined by grief, but it's like a tattoo. You've got this, you just become numb, and then certain parts of your life it cracks open, and grief comes in a little bit more, and you're able to try and figure it out and manage it or push it down. But something important is that when my kids were in preschool, they went to preschool with a little boy, Griffin Heron. And I was just becoming friends with Darcy. And we went to the playground with our kids. And I looked at her, and she had a really pretty necklace on, and it was a stone wrapped in wire. And I said to her, we didn't really know each other. Just our kids were having fun. And I said, Darcy, what's the necklace? What's up with the necklace? It's really cool. And she's like, that's the rock from the Mad River where my sister drowned. She knocked me down. And she told me her story. And then I felt compelled to tell her my story. So we had shared sister stories that day, and we've never stopped talking about our sisters from that day on. So to me, 42, maybe I was 42, that was a cracking open or a breaking open of when my sister went from becoming a ghost to a spirit. And it's almost like my relationship with her actually became alive again. It's kind of hard to explain. You had to be there, but it was pretty remarkable.
Well, and I've heard some of my other guests talk about, the one guy, Eric, talked about a guy at a certain moment got up to give his talk on stage for the first time about the trauma in his life. And afterwards, he said, "Thank you. I feel like this is finally behind me." The river of faith gave you a new sister. A sister that had some of the same baggage that you had, in a connection that is to this day a wonderful connection.
Yeah, no, it's
awesome.
And I think about all the different women that have been put in my path throughout my life, starting from kindergarten, 3rd grade, high school, first job, college. However they come about with purpose. And I think my sister has put them in my path because she couldn't be there. So I believe that. I believe that.
I believe similar in that if you're aware of the world and the process and have this faith, it just kind of unfolds, and it ends up being okay. Right? Maybe different than you ever would have planned it before, but okay.
Yeah.
What about Albert?
What about Albert?
Your wonderful husband, Albert, through the process of writing a book and losing a publisher and gaining a new publisher.
He has to put up with a lot.
He's such a wonderfully laid back
guy. Not easy. He had a very, the part of the book where it talks about my faith in the convenience store Catholic, and I got to give it to him, because he was like, your brothers, your mom, everybody who wrote in the book, their letters, they kind of talked about their faith, but you really haven't really talked about it too much. I'm like, what do you mean? How did I not talk about it? The whole book is about it. He's like, but not really. So you might want to just think about that. And then, and that's when I got put up, got to meet my publisher, or the senior editor, who told me that her family was there. Did I talk about that part?
No, not yet.
Oh, well, there is a part. So, when I was with my publisher and I gave my manuscript, he gave me a senior editor to work with. And she called me out of the blue and said, Michelle, I'm so-and-so, I'm your senior editor. I'm going to be working with you in the final stages of your book. And she said, do you know why I picked your book? And I'm like, no, why'd you pick my book? She said, because my family and I were on a vacation in Colorado the same time when your sister had her accident. So I know your story. I did not know all the details of your story. We were there in Colorado and we heard about it. And my mother said to me, do not lock that bathroom door. What happened to that poor little girl? And I was like, wow, my family and friends know the story, but a stranger has never come up and told me they know my story. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
We were talking about Albert, and then a link to
right.
Faith,
So
and then we got to the editor, and then we
thank
came
you.
back.
You get caught up. So
I'm tingling, right? I have those little
there's
tingles.
a lot of serendipitous things that
Yeah.
came about. So after I got off the phone with her, I wrote the epilogue with all the different points in my life about grieving my sister. And Albert was pivotal in saying, you really need to talk about your faith a little bit more. And so that's when I added those things. And my senior editor goes, the book just, it just has more glue. It has more glue. So I thank my husband for that.
He's a good guy, that Albert.
Yeah,
I like him.
I'll keep him.
I can't see why you wouldn't keep him. What else? What other untold stories do you want to share? There's from my perspective, is I've been writing more. You do this wonderful job at the end of the book where you're talking about words that you might want to insert into the new Hail Mary, and some of it's protective, and some of it's joy, and some of it's love. Tell me about that. When I'm writing and I put a word down now, I'm like, wow, what does that word really mean? And you think about it and you sort of dig into it a little bit. Where did that part come from?
Well, that came from my uncle. My uncle, who repurposed the Hail Mary originally back in 1969. I wish I had talked about it with him more, but I think it was the power of manifestation. And we need more of these things in our life. And when you say the Hail Mary, say you're having an argument with a friend or whatever, you're praying for forgiveness, for you to forgive them and for them to forgive you. So it's like a two-way street. And I just think those words, we just need more people to take action. And if you can inject action into your praying, it becomes mindful and it becomes a part of you and a way of life.
The manifestation is, as you talk about it, I was reading, and I don't remember what book this was in, but the author was talking about his morning meditation. After he has his glass of water, he imagines himself in his meditation at the end of his day, that day, talking about what went well today, what went poorly today, how did I react to this poor thing that happened in my day. And his comment was, by thinking about that at the beginning of the day, I can handle so many things. It's not identical, but it's a similar concept to what you're talking about, inserting your purposeful words
Right.
Into the new version of the Hail Mary.
Well, because, grief is a common denominator. We all lose. Losing a loved one is the worst of losses, but we lose a marriage, we lose a job, we lose our patience raising children or elderly parents, we lose our faith, our humanity. There's so many things that we grieve. So, if I can throw you a spiritual compass, or a tool for your toolbox that you can pull out and help you in a moment or a marathon of loss and grief and pain and struggle, maybe it'll help you.
Is that the purpose? Is that the goal of the book?
The goal is, number one was to an homage to my sister, her legacy. Keep, her light is still very bright. To keep my uncle's dream of that Hail Mary full of life to be for everyone, and more so. To realize my grief has moved through to a different level. I've gone through a gate passage by writing this book. My heart has been written down on paper. I have verbalized everything. I am accountable to my grief and my feelings. And then lastly, to help people. I mean, if we're not helping people and helping each other back up and, reaching out and reaching in during these times that we live in, that's our humanity.
It's the great part of our humanity, right? It is different as a lot of us have been. Left, right, it doesn't matter, right? As different as we've been, there is still that underlying humanity as we go through this process. For me and some of my stuff, the holidays have really been, a challenging time. I spent last Thanksgiving alone. Hard. Right?
Very hard.
And I think during these holiday times, sometimes as we're celebrating, we forget that there might be someone out there that's going through a hard time. What advice do you have to us as we're approaching the holidays?
Again, I'm not an expert. It's just my little thought process and what works for me. But, the holidays are coming. The holidays are here. And it's the holiday season which gives way to grief season. People are trimming trees and making lists and checking them twice. And in the grocery store, the person behind them, they're not celebrating. I mean, they've got a good face on. They're doing their best, but they're celebrating whether it's a 55-year-old loss or a 5-year-old loss or yesterday's loss. It's a very difficult time. Melancholy just waits for you. The smell can bring back a memory. A song can bring back, a memory of a loved one. There's always that empty seat at the table. And we just have to be mindful and be considerate and recognize that somebody else could be really suffering. And, I just need everybody to take care.
I love reaching out to those people. I love saying hello to strangers and just striking up a conversation. And it is so ironic that on so many occasions, the person that I struck up a conversation with randomly, there's some connection, right? So similar to your publisher story, the woman who eventually becomes your lead editor. Just a connection. And that's, to me, that's Jesus, that's God, that's the faith. To you, maybe that's Mary Ellen throwing somebody out in front of you.
Yeah, I believe that for sure. Yeah.
Final thoughts, other stuff, other questions, anything else that hits your mind or that you want to share? Maybe where can people grab your book?
They can grab my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I mean, it's on a lot of different platforms. I'm just happy that the comments I've received from people, like I got a comment from someone saying, I don't know the Hail Mary, but I can't wait to pray the Hail Mary and add it to my life. I mean, that if that isn't the whole goal, to help people, and it's there's a lot of emails and texts and people coming up to me and just saying, thank you for writing that book. It's been such a big help. I lost a loved one, and I feel like it's a service mission, and meeting people where they are and providing a little tool for their toolbox.
I love it. I can't thank you enough for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I
I
appreciate
can't
it.
thank you enough for sharing your story. Please, when you see all your family over the holidays, give them a big hug. I love you all so much. You're
I
such a
will.
wonderful family.
Thank you.
And thanks again.
Appreciate it.